I call the May 13th meeting of the Lane County Budget Committee to order. I'm going to read down through the committee members that I have here. Myself, Herb Blodman, Don Leslie, Dale Stoneberg on the phone, Larry Abel on the screen, Commissioner Buck's on the screen, Commissioner Bosevich is on the screen, Commissioner Farr is on the phone, Commissioner Bernie's on the screen, and Commissioner Sorensen is on the phone. One more check for Chris Hazen. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward into committee business. So have individuals had a chance to review the minutes from the May 4th meeting and have any comments? Let me get my screen changed here so I can see people. Of course, the slides keep changing on me. Okay, any committee members have any comments or corrections for the minutes from May 7th?
I do.
Larry, what do you got?
A couple of typos. So on page 2, under questions, it's Larry Abel asked, the word A should not be there. Asked A, how much? See that?
Christina's budget staff on the same page with Larry?
Yeah, they're trying to get on to show you the agenda right now, so they're struggling a little bit, but we can also go back with, I'm sorry, did you have a question about it or you're just correcting a typo?
Typo. And okay. I've got one on page 4 as well.
Okay.
Where Don asked a question about staffing equals in Marion County. And it said deputies, apostrophe S, but they shouldn't be an apostrophe, it just should be plural.
Okay.
And then on page 4 under Health and Human Services, Katrina Inman, it says her title, Acting Health and Human Services. I guess the word director should be added to that.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any other comments or any other comments or corrections for the minutes of May 7th? Seeing no more, is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second. Sorry.
Okay, it's been moved and approved to approve the minutes for the May 7th meeting as corrected. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Minutes are approved as amended. Christine, any other comments from or issues from budget staff?
Nope, we have nothing else for you today.
Okay. Any other items from committee members? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move forward into the section for Public Works. Dan Hurley, take her away.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, Budget Committee. Let me just make sure, can you see my screen with the slides?
Dan, I turned over presenter to Fahad. Is that, are you on Fahad's computer? Yes. And that is the name that shows below you, just FYI.
Okay, all right.
But we're not seeing it yet.
Okay, so Fahad is one of our budget analysts for the Budget Committee. My name is Dan Hurley. I have the great privilege to be the Public Works Director here at Lane County. And so good afternoon, and thank you for Budget Committee for your service. I know it's no small commitment. with the amount of time to review all these presentations and materials we put together for you, but we appreciate your public service and giving us that input. I'll try to be as quickly as I can. I know we're short on time here, and I want to get to our division managers who will share in more detail all the operations that are more interesting than my overview. But I want to make sure I also thank our budget staff here at Public Works who do tremendous work to put all this together. Specifically, our budget manager, Tanya Heaton, and our budget analyst, Suzanne Mueller, Fahad Qazi, and Kathy Howard, who are off the screen a little bit. Thank you for being here. So for Public Works, we have about 350 FTE, and those are broken into 8 divisions listed here. Our mission
We
for Public
actually,
Works,
Dan, sorry, we aren't seeing your screen. So I think Fahad still has to do something.
oh no, okay. All right.
It's our day for issues. There we go.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So there we go. Our divisions you can see there now. So we talked about our mission. The focus really is on public infrastructure, primarily for Public Works. I like to think that we provide that framework for people to live out their great lives, aligning with the county's purpose to improve lives. Looking at our overall budget by fund, you can see on the pie chart there, we receive a very small amount of general fund, less than 0.5%. We have one property management officer who manages the county's parking lots, a handful of county facilities, and our tax foreclosed properties. And then we receive a little over $500,000 for sustaining animal services within our general services division. The majority of our funds come in a special revenue fund, and you can see those listed here. The largest of those would be the road fund. We also have 3 enterprise funds. Excuse me. These are fee-based and intended to be self-supporting. The largest of these is the solid waste fund, where people pay their tipping fee when they dispose of their solid waste at our transfer stations and the landfill. And then we have one internal service fund. This receives money from across the county for motor pool operations on a cost reimbursement basis. Now looking into the details of our resources, you can see that we receive money, about 1/3 of our resources come in as fees and charges. And so I already spoke about fleet and waste. The second large pot there for fees is land management division. We receive fees for building, planning, environmental permits. And then the other large block there in orange is for state revenue, again, about 1/3. Most of that's coming in through the road fund, through the state highway revenue there. That is related to the gas taxes, heavy haul permits, and driver and motor vehicle fees. We also receive money for the state for specific construction projects. We're anticipating $4.3 million in the upcoming budget. And total resources, just totaling over $103 million there. So COVID-19, obviously this is a very strange budget year. We are kind of reeling from the impact of this in many ways. One of the biggest is for our revenue. Almost all of our funds are at risk in some way. Starting with the state highway fund, with the lockdown, the decrease in driving, there's a correlative impact to gas taxes and what we'll be receiving from the state. With tourism essentially stopped, our transient room tax and car rental tax has dried up. Lane Event Center, they were forced to stop holding events in March. We're not sure when that's going to be able to open up. We've already had to cancel the fair. Parks, we've been really worried about, but we're anticipating with guidance from the state that we'll be able to open our campgrounds on May 18th if all goes well. We're still working through that process to get that approved, but so far looking good. Building and planning permits, we've had our customer service center closed to walk-in traffic, but we're still servicing people, but the amount of permit volumes has dropped off substantially, and anticipating a long economic recovery, slowing down substantially from the permits we received there. Solid waste fees has been an interesting one. We've definitely seen a big uptick in customers at the transfer stations with all the home remodeling projects that people are doing while they're staying at home. But we're seeing a decrease in the commercial waste hauling. It'll be interesting to see that one, but anticipating with an economic slowdown that we'll see a substantial drop off in our solid waste fees. And then corner preservation revenues, those are tied to transfers of property, again with an economic slowdown, anticipating an impact there. Now looking toward our expenditures, our total operating expenses, about a little over 107 million there. Our operational expenses are up, shown there, by 14.5%. That's being driven primarily by an increase in capital expenses. In our road fund, we're looking at a little over a $4 million increase. We're able to put more money into our roads due to House Bill 2017 a few years ago and an increase in funding from the state. Also, waste management, close to a $4 million increase in their capital expenses. We're looking at some large projects. One is at the Florence Transfer Station, looking to do some big improvements there, and then also gearing up to start construction on phase 6 of the landfill at the Short Mountain landfill. For future challenges and opportunities, in the transportation area, probably the biggest one is territorial highway. We accepted territorial highway, at least part of it, it's a 3-phase approach from the state in exchange for Delta Highway. So over time, we will have received $30 million to take on about 40 miles of additional roadway. We have a big project coming up at Stony Point to begin the construction there. Local access roads continue to be a thorny issue. We're having a conversation with the board. We've done a couple updates, trying to find some resolution on how we manage our local access roads. So local access roads are public roads that don't receive public funding and are not being adequately maintained. And we recently took in Collard Lake into the county road system, but we're looking at ways to prevent local access roads in the future, or at least make sure there's agreements for how this can be maintained. Asset management, we're implementing a comprehensive software system to be able to pull in the data from multiple systems that track the condition of our assets to allow us to do better informed, data-driven decision-making and budget forecasting. We're looking forward to rolling that out as we get into summer and fall. And then federal funding, obviously a big challenge there as discussed with the state, similar with the federal funding through the FLAP, the Federal Land Access Program, anticipating that there could be a significant impact in what we received there. Stormwater has been an ongoing issue and is becoming more and more of an issue. We received a new permit from the state, our NPDES permit for managing urban stormwater. We're anticipating a tripling of our existing $2.7 million in expenses there over the next few years to be able to fully implement that permit. So we're having conversations with the board. We'll be talking about the potential of looking at a stormwater utility fee. Economic stability, of course, as we talked about in the previous slide. The Climate Action Plan is both a challenge and an opportunity. We're midway through the phase 1 of our Climate Action Plan, where we're looking at our internal operations. We just completed our greenhouse gas inventory, and now we're starting to envision the second and third phase, where we're engaging the community to talk about mitigation and adaptation and resilience. Waste processing is also another challenge and an opportunity. We're trying to get to a 63% recovery rate by 2025. That's going to take some major investment, and we're looking at the potential of constructing a regional waste processing facility. We've got a wordy slide for you here, but I wanted to provide it so that you can read at your leisure. This is our strategic work plan. So this takes elements from the strategic plan countywide and then adds in our key initiatives at Public Works that are outside of that we're trying to move forward over the next few years. Tied to these, but not listed here, are our key performance indicators. We're in the middle of a project to identify key performance indicators for all the divisions and get those into the Tableau software that the county has been using and helping them services for a long time, but sort of new to us at Public Works. Here's our Public Works leadership team. We always try to throw in a little humor and thought we'd add some COVID humor with it this time. Starting from top to bottom there, we have Michael Johns, our General Services Division Manager. Mr. Helmut there is Kiera Miller, Land Management Division. We have Tanya Heaton, our Budget Manager. Peggy Kepler is our County Engineer and Engineering Construction Services Manager. Jeff Orlandini, Waste Management Division. Brett Henry, Parks. Corey Bowler at Lane Event Center. Orange Schumacher might need some remedial training on how to wear a mask there at road maintenance. And then we've got our overachiever there in the gas mask with Lance Inglet, who is both the assistant director and our admin division manager. So thankfully, you'll get to see their faces when they come up to you. And we're here in the Goodson room at Delta, where we're able to have everybody with physical distancing spaced around the room. And my last slide before I transition is to talk about some partnerships. We couldn't do what we do without some key partnerships. A few of them are listed here. We have street maintenance agreements, particularly with the City of Eugene for managing the complicated mosaic of jurisdiction within the River Road Santa Clara area. We have stormwater service agreements with the City of Eugene and the City of Springfield to manage stormwater within the urban growth boundary. We work through the Greater Oregon Fleet Cooperative to purchase our fuel in bulk. We work with LRIG, the Lane Radio Interoperability Group, to manage and finance our radio systems. We have great partnerships out at Howard Buford Park, receiving thousands of volunteer hours and contributions from the Friends Group out there in Mount Pisgah Arboretum. We work with the Central Lane MPO on regional transportation planning, and then we've had long relationships with Bring Recycling to advance waste reduction education in the schools and businesses, and we're currently working on a new project with them to increase recovery from construction and demolition. And that's all I have for you. We'll be back for questions, but I'm going to pass it over to Keir Miller from the Land Management Division.
Great, thanks, Dan, and good afternoon, members of the Budget Committee and Commissioners. Again, my name is Keir Miller. I'm Division Manager for Land Management. The Land Management Division oversees the administration of our land use, building codes, and our on-site sanitary wastewater program. The program consists of 37 FTE. Our land use program is responsible for both current planning, which is the issuance of permits, special use permits, and long-range planning, which involves comprehensive code amendments that support the rural comp plan. Our building safety program consists of our plans examiners, our building inspectors, electrical inspectors, on-site wastewater sanitarians, and of course, our residential and commercial building inspectors. We also have a program called Coordinated Services, and this is our outward-facing program that supports the public, performs a lot of customer service functions. These are our permit technicians and the folks that people deal with when they come into the customer service center and are looking to apply for a permit to build a house, for example. And finally, we have our code compliance program. Our code enforcement officers are responsible for enforcing building and land use codes and our nuisance abatement code as well. So in Land Management Division, we've obviously, like everybody, been impacted significantly by COVID-19, and we've tried to look at these impacts through three lenses: impacts to our customers and our operations, impacts to our staff, and of course, impacts to our budget. As Dan mentioned earlier, we closed our customer service center back on March 16th. That had a dramatic impact in our permit activity. We saw permit revenues drop off significantly. This slide says an average of 67%, and I just want to stress that that was from the time period of mid-March, March 16th through April 15th. We saw a 67% reduction in permit activity across the division. I've since rerun those numbers this morning, and I'm happy to say that in the last, since March 17th through May 12th, those numbers are back up. Now we're only running negative 45%. So we do think that that initial hit to the economy and just operations in general was the biggest hit. We hopefully will continue to recover as things begin to normalize, but I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. As far as operational changes, we have over half of our staff working remotely. For the most part, staff have done really well adapting. We've done a lot of work to transition our service model to a virtual model, and that's been pretty effective. So changes there as well. So some of the highlights in this fiscal year, last fiscal year, we've been able to implement a program called Bluebeam, which is an electronic plan review software. This has been in the works for a number of years, but it's been essentially, especially timely with the COVID-19 outbreak. It allows individuals to submit building permits online, which then staff can review remotely can mark up plan sets and send them back out to developers and builders. And that's been a heavy lift, and it's really, the timing's been great with this particular pandemic. Other highlights include 859 building permits issued and almost nearly 4,000 building permits. I'll say that even though things have slowed down significantly, we were off to a fairly robust start to this year, so permit activity has been high. So some of the changes, challenges, and opportunities. Moving forward, the Land Management Division isn't proposing any FTE changes in the coming budget. We are currently holding a number of positions vacant, just due to the impacts and the uncertainties. We'll be watching our budget closely, obviously, to figure out what changes need to be made. Luckily, the division's been in a pretty healthy place, and we've built reserves, strong reserves, to weather just this kind of an impact. Traditionally, land management, when there's a dip in the economy, we're sort of the first, it hits us first because the building and housing economies tend to be so reactive and fragile that we often see those impacts first and they last the longest. So one of our challenges is just trying to understand just how long and how deep this new recession will last. Another challenge is that we do have, most of our programs are fully staffed, but we do have a continuing need for resources in our code enforcement program, which is an area that the division has been discussing with the Board of Commissioners. We were hoping to potentially add a half FTE to that position through a fee increase proposal, but we tabled that for the time being, given the uncertainties and the economic hardships that everybody's facing. And then finally, as an opportunity, we're really trying to use this crisis as an opportunity to learn, expand, and improve our service delivery. We've come up with some creative solutions to some of the social distancing issues that we've encountered. We're doing more electronic reviews. Our building inspectors are able to conduct some inspections remotely with the use of technology such as FaceTime. So we want to learn from this incident and move forward stronger into the future. That's all I have for now, and I'll turn it over to Corey Buller, our Lane Event Center manager.
Any questions by way after? Questions at the end.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity, committee members, commissioners. So typically right now, as you can see, we'd be doing some community events, private events, things like that. But as I'm sure you've heard now, our business is shut down. For the community, we understand that. Businesses are usually using our facility right now as a retail outlet, place to do some business, or for other events, for fundraising events. We'd be generating up to $35 million in economic impact. We are anticipating and hoping for some sort of an opening in the phase 2. We're looking at protocols and ways that can impact some of our clients. And we're also getting creative in the ways that we're looking at some of the events that we'd be doing for the future. What does that mean right now? We had a great year going. We had almost 113,000 people come through the Lane County Fair this last year. We set some records in several areas and many of our revenue areas. We were on track to probably exceed our budgeted revenue for the year. In the last, since March, we have lost approximately 35 events, which correlates to approximately $300,000. The good news is we jumped right away to minimize our expenses. We've kept some vacant positions open, and we've also found some creative ways to do some work without some expenses. And so I think we're going to be able to knock out almost $300,000 expenses on the other side. So we're happy about that. But what does that mean moving forward? So we are still going to be awaiting guidelines and protocols for how we can open up. A lot of our members and clients are just businesses doing retail. We'll see if there's opportunities for that. We're also working on some internal opportunities to engage our community and be part of the economic recovery. We know that there's going to be people looking for outlets and ways to do business. And we think that even though we had to cancel the 2020 fair, as Dan noted, our plan for that was a long-term sustainable business plan. So the impact, while we had to lose it and it's probably the first one since, at least the 1900s, that's had to close down. You know, we don't think the impact for the end of the fair is going to be there, so we're looking forward to the future. So I'm going to leave it there until we have some questions. So I'll be turning it over to Parks.
Well, good afternoon, Budget Committee. Parks Division offers a diverse range of services to the public, which includes water access via marinas and boat ramps, and access to rare natural areas. Our park system is a very wide footprint, basically from the Pacific coast all the way to the Cascades. The Parks Division manages 69 parks, totaling over 4,000 acres. As previously mentioned, we manage 3 marinas and 29 water access sites, which consist of primarily boat ramps. We also provide the public 5 campgrounds, 2 of which are open year-round, and 7 natural resource areas where habitat is preserved. To service our parks for the next fiscal year, we are requesting a little over $4.7 million for operating expenses and 20.8 full-time employees and staffing. COVID-19 has impacted our services and our revenues in a significant way. On March 23rd of this year, we closed our 5 campgrounds per the governor's executive order. We rely heavily on user fees as we receive no funding through property taxes. The impact to our revenues was amplified since the outbreak occurred at the beginning of our recreation season. We kept our passive recreation sites open. Those include trails and water access points for the public as an outlet for people to be able to relieve stress. We currently have 6 employees that are working remotely. Looking at highlights from this past year, it mainly involved implementing the adopted master plan. 2 action plans that were accomplished include establishing a volunteer program and convening a parks funding task force to search for sustainable funding mechanisms to improve our parks. We hired a volunteer coordinator that has hit the ground running and has hosted several volunteer events at our parks. Additionally, we established a parks funding task force that will research additional funding opportunities and provide recommendations to the county commissioners in a final report when they complete their services. Managing all these facilities presents some future challenges and opportunities. We are proposing to add 2 full-time employees to our maintenance staff to help better take care of our facilities, keep them safe, welcoming to the public. We've also developed some strategies to recoup lost revenue, which include cutting expenditures, reducing the turf area in which we maintain, and extending our recreation season by adding shoulder months both for the fall and the spring. As the pictures show, we have a significant backlog of deferred maintenance caused by aging infrastructure that was built back in the 60s and 70s. To effectively prioritize our deferred maintenance investments, we are hiring a consultant to conduct a facilities condition assessment. Finally, as I previously mentioned, the Parks Funding Task Force will recommend funding sources to help us to diversify our funding portfolio. I appreciate your consideration of these requests, and thank you for giving me the time to present a summary of the parks budget. Next up, we have Jeff Orlandini with Waste Management.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So, try to be brief here. You can see all the services we provide in waste management. I think that most people know pretty much what we do and what we run. We do in our environmental services this year, we've added our climate action work as well. And the COVID-19 service impacts, Dan mentioned those before. So while we've seen quite an increase in our transfer station customer count, that can be anywhere up to, you know, a 25% increase in some of those stations in a week, depending on the week. We have seen a pretty decent decrease in our waste from businesses and restaurants. So overall, that's kind of a net decrease, but it's certainly not impacting us quite as much as some other areas in the county. Some of our highlights, so again, for the 3rd year running, we have the highest recovery rate in the state of Oregon. We're very proud of that. And while it is the highest and noteworthy that many of the other counties and jurisdictions went down last year, we still have, about 9% to go in the next 5 years to meet our goal. And so that'll be a lot about how we can process waste and in particular get rid of some of the organics that are coming in that make up a large portion of our waste stream. Our tons of waste through March are pretty on target with what we did a year ago. And we've been able to maintain our full system operations during this crisis, which is a big deal for us. So all our transfer stations have operated as normal. We've added Sunday service at Glenwood as normal, which has helped with some of the strain on that system. And so our employees have really been showing up and serving their community just as before, which says a lot about their dedication to their jobs. Lastly, we, again, like others, don't propose any FTE changes for next year. Some of our highlights, our gas reduction, so we are the largest producer of greenhouse gases for the county at the landfill, and some of the impacts from the COVID could be that, could delay some of our ability to invest in some systems to find new ways to capture that gas and use it, but we're still looking into researching the best ways to do that and finding ways that we can reduce that output. And we're really excited. We got a new box truck this year, just got delivered last week, that will allow us to do rural household hazardous waste roundups in some of our smaller communities. And so we typically bring a big trailer out to some of our larger communities in the rural areas, but now we'll be able to go and do collections at places that we've never been to before. So we're excited to get out and be able to service our rural communities more. So overall, I would say that we're really proud of the fact that our folks have been able to maintain our operation. And, we are looking at the impacts to our budget. But, I guess the silver lining is that garbage is certainly still being produced by folks. And we're still there to service and make sure it's put in the best place it can be. So up next, I'll have our manager of our largest division in Public Works, the Roads Division, Oren Schumacher.
Good afternoon, committee members, commissioners. My name is Oren Schumacher. I'm the roads manager, as Jeff just said, with Public Works. The slide in front of you shows kind of the key components of our program. I'm not going to jump into those, but I want to jump down to the COVID-19 service impacts, both for this fiscal year and the following fiscal year. Just as a note, road staff have been working since March, more or less at full capacity. What we're seeing, though, is that the COVID-19 has created some restrictions on how we can do the work we do, and that's created some ripples in our performance and ability to preserve some of the miles we want to get done. So you're seeing a number there of 10 to 50%. That's what we're looking for in the forecast for this upcoming construction season and following fiscal year. Obviously, some of that's going to be a moving target based on seeing what the impacts do truly reach as we navigate our way through this COVID experience. One of the keynotes there too is our seasonal staffing, reductions or limitations. Social distancing requires that we maintain a constant 6-foot spacing among staff. As you guys can imagine, going from an office site to a work site and getting 93 permanent FTE plus our seasonal staff out to work sites is going to be a problem there. So we're trying to figure out how to manage that as we speak. And hopefully they'll have an update to county administration and our director shortly. Some of the highlights of our 19-20 year, you'll see on that far left gray box, the $1.5 million in FEMA revenues. This was Snowmageddon, if everybody remembers. I know we had a mild winter this year, but that was money we received back from the Snowmageddon impacts. The good news is the bulk of that money just came in. Couldn't have been a better timing in terms of seeing us having to look for funds where we can find them. The yellow box is our IVM program. The reason I highlighted that for this fiscal and the upcoming fiscal year is that we have done a lot of improvements in that program to streamline both the use of our equipment and our staffing. And just 2 years ago, we reintroduced a very limited program of herbicide applications, which are starting to show some impacts on allowing staff to do other work and limiting our repeat maintenance in certain areas. So those are improvements. We spoke last year on the budget regarding Lane County being one of the, or actually it was the highest rated road system in the state of Oregon. We highlighted there again, one of the great outcomes is we did receive another award competing against California, Washington, and other Western states as one of the top programs for chip seal on the West Coast. So that was a great award for the efforts of our team and our innovations as we move forward. Future challenges and opportunities. I guess some of these are both at the same time. We are proposing the addition of 2 FTE into the roads division this upcoming fiscal year. One would be an operator position in our Zone 1 crew, which is our largest crew, primarily because it involves the River Road, Santa Clara, and Springfield areas and surrounding UGB sites. So it's a large crew. And we're also requesting a maintenance lead position, which is on our vegetation crew, and that is to support the additional 40-plus miles we picked up from ODOT with the transfer of Territorial Highway. The asset management system is still in place. We've been working now into year 2, trying to implement this program that came out of the audit for road maintenance back in 17-18, and hopefully we'll have that system functioning towards the end of the summer, and that'll have some great returns for us. I listed mobile operations. This is something we're trying to transition our teams to more iPad, remote-focused data gathering and tracking. I guess it's a challenge and an opportunity in the sense that we have to train and upstaff the equipment for that. But again, the future opportunities really do create a lot of neat changes for our program. Hitting the target preservation miles. Our ultimate goal, if we were to maintain our road system in the best condition we can, it would be 90 chip seal miles a year. We've been struggling to get there based on every time we try, something happens, and this year it's COVID-19. So yet again, we'll see if we can achieve what we can, but I don't suspect we'll be hitting that target this fiscal year. And then urban roadways, there will probably be some conversation on this in the future of the board and other places, but these are roads within the urban growth boundaries of the city of Eugene and Springfield, where we don't have any funding for the system in essence. So there's no stormwater fees to collect monies, and these are complicated roads, curb and gutter and underground stormwater. So we'll continue to talk about those as a challenge moving forward. That's kind of a painting of a picture for our upcoming fiscal year in roads. And I believe next is Peggy Kessler with engineering.
Good afternoon. I'm going to change this slide for you. So engineering and construction services primarily plans and develops and constructs the public improvements for the county. Our focus is around roads and bridges, but we also work with our parks crew and also with waste management to help them develop their public infrastructure needs. This year, we've had some challenges ahead of us. We are looking at some changes in how we do our construction activities, but working with Association of Oregon Counties, we've been able to put together some good best practices for construction management. Last year, we had a very successful year. We constructed just about $14 million worth of public infrastructure that included 5 bridges, 2 slide repair projects, 9.13 miles of overlay, and 12 miles of slurry seal projects. Also included in last year's work program was our American with Disabilities Act requirements that we make sure that all of our public rights-of-way are compliant and that they are accessible for people with disabilities. We constructed 139 sidewalk ramps and several pedestrian signals. One of the things as we look forward to this year's construction, I thought you might be interested in hearing how the work that we do also helps the community. This year, we'll also have another 14 projects that we'll be working on. We have completed the bidding process of 9 of those projects already. We have 2 more coming up in June. But what we are seeing is that our contractors are trying to stay as local as they can. We have a number of contractors who have not done projects with the county before, but are willing to step out and try our projects. So we have several local contractors, probably 5 of them that are going to be doing work for us this year. And as we looked at those construction projects that are coming out this summer, we are estimating that we are putting to work out for about 434 field workers. These are in the construction community, everything from the large contractors to smaller contractors that are owned and operated by individuals. With COVID-19, we are also looking to the federal government. We're hoping that this fall that they may have a stimulus package that comes out, and we have identified 3 projects that will be shovel ready and may qualify for funding at that level. This coming year, we continue to work on our stormwater program. Stormwater compliance, we have 4 different permits that we're required to manage, that being the total maximum daily load limits that are required for stormwater quality. We also have our NPDES permit, which requires that we manage the stormwater runoff developed areas within the urban areas. And we have requested 1 FTE to help with that program. We will see a number of increases over the next 5 years, and we will be coming back to the board soon to talk about different ways to fund that program. And then we are also continuing to look for as many funding opportunities as we can. Our capital improvement program is about $4.2 million annually, but with 1,400 miles of roadway, we have a lot of work that needs to be kept going, and so we look for funding opportunities as much as possible. I will now turn it over to Michael.
Good afternoon, Budget Committee members. General services consist of animal services and fleet services, and the big change this year was that as the beginning of the calendar year, facilities moved from general services back to county administration. Our COVID-19 service impacts, of course, the fleet has been, mechanics have been working in their normal positions because you can't really work on a car from home. But we've had 5 other people working partially telework. The animal control officers have been using national guidelines to respond to just the most critical incidents involving usually dangerous behavior with dogs. And then 2.5 FTE from general services staff have been supporting the EOC for the response to the COVID. Some of our highlights, you can see up here for last year, our equipment counts for both heavy and light duty and number of work orders. On the lower right-hand corner, you can see the pictures of 2 of our charging stations, and that leads us to our some of our challenges and opportunities. We have a large emphasis on electrifying at least the light-duty fleet for now. For the next several years, we'll probably by 2020 have the dispatch pool completely electrified, and that's going to impact a lot of the divisions, departments within the county as we formulate our plans on electric vehicle charging station infrastructure, and we'll be briefing Dan next week on our positions for that. Also, we're increasing 0.5 FTE from the part-time to a full-time animal welfare officer that will really help us respond to all the calls in the community about animal welfare that we can't always get to. One thing we also need to decide what we're going to do with is what is our jointly owned First Avenue Animal Shelter. What do we want to do with that, or do we want to get out from underneath of it? And then the last thing is we've had audit and policy recommendations based on the audit we've done. We've had 2 committees that we've worked very hard on, and we were very close to wrapping up those changes when the COVID crisis hit, and myself and Nathan Mitchell-Hooks have been working full-time in the EOC, so we haven't really been able to finish those, but as soon as we get back, we'll be finishing those up and implementing all those policies that we haven't done yet. And I will be followed by Lance Inglet for the executive role of administration.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think we're getting pretty close to being back on schedule. Lance Inglet, Assistant Public Works Director and Division Manager for our administrative services. The first slide is up there right now. I'd point out that the $38 million includes revenue from other agencies and is explained elsewhere. 64% of our expenses are actually within the personnel, and we remain at 21 FTE. The highlights from the COVID, we've been able to take 21 of our work, of our employees and set them up to telework, though not all of them are. We've developed systems and processes to keep our administrative services running in the event that we needed to fully remote the process. The other challenge that we've seen a little bit of is a slowing of services, just in a delay in technology. But as people become more comfortable with it, we're sure to be able to for individuals within the department. Some of the highlights, $27.6 million in transactions, a little over 21,000. The 114 positions identified as telework eligible is department-wide. And then we were able to complete 2 labor agreements, which is 2 of our 3 represented groups that we have as members of Public Works. Future challenges and opportunities, we do not request any FTE changes. Really, it's going to be capturing and recovering from the COVID-19 impacts. You've already heard quite a bit from the other divisions about the impacts that they're having, and we'll be able to do some adjustments in terms of how we go to work, how we serve not only the internal divisions, but our customers and the public as well. And then human resource adjustments, we continue to do implementation of the pay equity requirements, and then we will be looking at participating in the AFSCME bargaining session. And then subject to your questions, I'll turn it back over to Dan Hurley to take any questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lance. So as you can tell, I have an impressive and talented group of vision managers that carry out an amazingly diverse set of important services for our community. This is our last slide for you. Don't ask me what that sign means, but thankfully that's not one of our Lane County signs. I thought I'd leave you some humor though. So at this point, we would like to do our best to field your questions, and I will close off my screen there so that I can see you all.
Great. Actually, we're going to start with Dale Stoneberg, please. Dale, go ahead.
Thanks, Herb. I have 2 questions. One probably, I'll ask it to Dan, but it'll probably get past the Kier, I'm guessing. First, it's awesome you guys are doing this online permitting system. I think that's fantastic. Is there a statutory requirement on when the department needs to respond within a certain time frame to permitting issues? And if there's not a statutory, is there a department one?
There are statutory timelines. 180 days is the one I know of for most of our applications. We are trying to advocate for some state action to give an extension to that. Is there anything else you'd like to add there, Kier?
No, I think you hit it. I mean, as far as Dan mentioned, the 180 days, that's from a land use planning standpoint. State building codes, there's not a set timeline, but we do have internal parameters that we try to meet. Typically, right now, we're, within 20 days or so of a complete permit for building. Land use permits tend to take quite a bit longer because of the process built into it.
Awesome, I appreciate that. And then my second question is, it looks like across the entire department, there's roughly 6 FTE that's being proposed added. Is most of that road fund dollars, or is it coming from a different source?
I think in total, I said 2.5 FTE, correct? Okay. Maybe Sean can help me here. I was only remembering 2.5.
Yes, our proposed budget includes 6 additional FTE, 2 in parks, 2 in road and bridge, half in general services, and 1.5 in engineering. Of those, 3.5 are in the road fund.
And is that the SRS, or is that road fund? SRS road fund or road fund?
Our operating expenses are all in the road fund.
Okay, thank you.
Very able.
I've got several. The first one is administrative services. The capital expenses are 186,000, but on the next page it says there are no anticipated capital expenses.
What was the last part, no anticipated capital expenses?
Yeah, in the description, but on the budget, there's 186,000 proposed.
I think I'm gonna need Tanya's help on this one. Or do you have it, Susan, you know what you're talking about?
Hi, Larry, it's Tanya. I see in the budget document, page 264, where there's 186 listed as capital. Those are for the Delta surface maintenance and do not include any actual capital improvements. I apologize for that and will research how that got into that line.
That's fine. And then engineering and construction services. Engineering under programs increased 3.4 million, which is 45% increase. Any specific reasons why that shows up?
I'll let Peggy talk to that, but we've added the number of projects we're doing with HB 2017 transportation funding. Anything to add to that, Peggy?
I think the best way to describe that is that we have a capital improvement program that we look at the road fund issues or monies at $4.2 million annually. Then we supplement our program with federal funds, state funds to work on other identified projects. So that's why we have a difference from our road fund amount to the total construction program that we have. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
The certified on behalf of others. So we're doing projects for the city of Springfield, for example, and other municipalities.
Okay. And then fleet replacement is increased 4,400,000.
That's one, the fleet replacement varies greatly year from year because of the cyclical nature of when the vehicles come due for replacement. So they vary widely from, some years we've had less than $1 million and others is closer to 7 or 8 million.
Okay. And then Michael, again, let's see, that's right. Capital expenses increased 4,200,000, but then on page 74, it says there are no anticipated capital expenses.
I'll let Tanya answer that.
Hi. So in accounting terminology, the purchase of a vehicle is capital outlay. So in general services, we are purchasing vehicles and heavy equipment, but we are not making building improvements.
Okay, but the heavy equipment is capital outlay, right?
It is capital outlay, but not a capital project or a capital improvement.
Okay. Land management, personnel services decreased 212,000, yet the FTEs are the same.
Oh, vacancy variance?
Yes.
Yeah. So this year, the land management division, we've traditionally been carry a number of vacancies, and we implemented the vacancy variance of 3% this year, so that would reflect that churn $12,000 figure.
Okay, it's the vacancies weren't included in last year's budget?
No, this is the first year we've began using the vacancy variance.
Okay, and one more question. I'm sure you'll be glad it's the last one. In the on page 288, resources for road and bridge, federal revenues were 465,000 last year, and it was 0 this year. Is that?
So our federal revenues in the road and bridge division are FEMA reimbursements for most years. And the current budget was 465,000. We're actually going to do a supplemental and supplemental 4 for that because we received over $1 million additional. But we do not budget for FEMA events because we never know when they will occur.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hazen, go ahead, please.
Okay. Quick question for Jeff about waste management, and then I had a couple quick follow-ups on roads. Landfill gas. Just an update for me, I'm not up to date. It used to be that the Short Mountain landfill was generating electricity from the landfill gas. What's the status of that project?
It's still doing so, although not as effectively and efficiently as we would want. And also, a lot of what's going on right now is that electricity may not be the most ideal use for that gas. But a lot of there's kind of 2 ways we capture, right? We put it in the landfill, we let it sit there for years and start, creating, especially after we cap the cell, or we can capture it on the front end kind of before it enters. And so that system's still working. They are making improvements right now to a lot of those wells so they can increase their efficiency, but it's nowhere near as efficient as some of the other systems that we'll be researching.
Great. Hope it can be improved in the future. Okay. Question about roads. So I'm also on the Transport Advisory Committee, and we talk about some of the key drivers for road improvements as being safety, as well as economic development. And I wonder, Dan or Oren, if you, or maybe it's Amy, whoever's most appropriate, can you explain or just update the committee on how the Public Works Department prioritizes road improvements based upon those key concerns of the general public? Economic development and safety. So safety being the top one.
This is Weller, maybe Warren, if you want to jump in. We do work through, we have 2 committees that work in public works, and then actually have input from other representatives from around the county for our fatal crash investigation team. So there's two committees, the fatal crash investigation team. So we are tracking, crashes and fatalities by mode across the county on county roads and investigating those as they occur. So where we have hot spots, those raise in priority. We also have a committee, our SEIT, Systemic Engineering Implementation Team, that's looking at how we systemically make improvements, looking at engineering, education, and enforcement. So those 2 committees help prioritize that work, and I should probably just let Peggy speak.
Hi, Chris. So we work with the Transportation Advisory Committee and look at all of the different road projects that have been identified in multiple programs. The first one is our preservation program, which we talked about, and we look at all of our pavement condition index. We work with our road maintenance staff, identify which ones are eligible for chip sealing, and then others that are needing overlay work that then go to the capital improvement side. And that was identified last year by our Transportation Advisory Committee as one of our highest priorities, is to make sure that we preserve our roadways as much as possible. We also have other requirements that we made commitment to when we saw the number of fatalities going up several years ago, that we would dedicate $500,000 annually towards safety improvements. So we want to make sure that when we do our capital improvement program, that we prioritize that work to make sure that we do implement as many safety measures as we can. We also have our ADA requirements now, where we have to bring all of our roadways into compliance with the American with Disabilities Act, and we have dedicated $250,000 annually to put in ADA ramps and also ped poles. And then if there's any money left over, then we look at our transportation system plan, which identifies a number of projects that are road enhancement projects. And those are the ones that if we have any funding opportunities that allow us to work on those roads, then we prioritize that work. So our first emphasis is pavement preservation. We do put money into our bridge system for preservation. Also, we have $1 million annually that we want to keep in there, and $500,000 in safety, and then $250,000 in the ADA ramp compliance program. So that's where we have been focusing on these past years. Anything else?
So in economic development, so is that part of the prioritization process?
It is considered in the process, and while it's at the bottom of our ability to reach that specifically, all of the construction work that we do provide has some economic development opportunities that go with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Rosevich, please.
Thank you. A couple quick questions, which I don't expect an immediate response of. We'll take a response in writing. If I could get the cost of the climate action planning work for FY 19-20 and the projected cost for 2021. And if I could also get an accounting of the road fund, federal dollars in reserve and federal dollars coming in and going out. My understanding is we're supposed to be using non-federal dollars out of reserve first for some of those added projects in the capital plan. And I haven't seen an accounting of that. If I can get some kind of report on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Commissioner, we'll get you that.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Dale, did you have one more?
Yeah, it's more of a comment, but I'm struggling on adding 6 FTE. I get 2 of it can't be used for something else, but I guess I'm struggling with adding 4 FTE when our public safety system's the way it is. And so I would probably say I'm going to do if there is any kind of support there, look at doing some kind of different option with that. That's all.
Any other questions for Public Works?
If I could just make a comment, Dan, great to see you again, and really looking forward to the impact that your asset management system can have on your ability to present, some granular data in future years on improvements that your department is having and the impact that those improvements are having.
We're really looking forward to that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Dan, and all your team.
All right, thank you.
And then just to let everybody know, I've got a I'm getting a little slow on my internet speed here, and my video is getting a little grainy. So feel free to speak up if I don't see your hand raised. And if we could, does anybody need a break right now, or can we move right forward into assessment and taxation? Okay, nobody's needing a break. Let's go ahead if Mike's available.
I need a break.
I don't think they're logged on.
I'll be back in a couple minutes.
So Christine,
Yeah,
you said
Chair,
you don't think that.
Correct. Sorry,
Go ahead.
Chair, this is Christine. We don't see that they are logged on yet, so we'll double check with them. So you might want to take a few minutes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's reconvene at 2:55. Okay, so the committee's on break back at 2:55. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Budget Committee members of the Board of County Commissioners. Appreciate the time to present today. And today I'm presenting for assessment taxation. As you know, I'm the assessor tax collector. Just jumping right into our general mission. As you may know, the mission of assessment taxation is to effectively appraise property and to calculate and distribute taxes and related information to the public in a manner that merits the highest degree of confidence, integrity, efficiency, and fairness. We do serve 85 taxing districts, including Lane County. Those include local governments, schools, special districts, and other districts that provide essential services to citizens of Lane County. As you may see behind me, and I always I'm always a good graphics person. I have the Lane County dollar bill behind me, and you can see, and I always want to point this out in any kind of budget presentation or meeting, that 11 cents on the dollar of the work that we do in assessment taxation goes to Lane County. The rest goes to the other districts. So budget details. Our resources are similar as prior years, the CAFA grant. And for those of you who don't know, the CAFA grant is a grant that is received and allocated by the state of Oregon and Department of Revenue. It's from 3 primary sources: recording, delinquent tax spread on the interest, and also interest occurred on accounts. Next part is tax penalties. Primarily those are late filing penalties or non-filing penalties, foreclosure penalties, again, late filing penalties, miscellaneous sales. We do receive some funds from the DCBS for the community relations fee for helping to administer that. We do have some service charges, and of course, general fund is the primary resource that we do have. COVID-19 resource impact. Now, this is a little harder to figure out as far as projecting forward into the future, but I did my best as far as in providing some guidance both to the county and to other taxing districts that is changing kind of week by week as we get more data in. But generally, property tax dollars, the primary component that's at risk for this year is more on the collection side, is that the trimester payments that we're receiving right now only comprises about 4% of the total property taxes that we collect. So we won't really know on the collection side as far as the people's and businesses' abilities to pay until we get into that November payment time period. Right now in collections, I am estimating that down short term, but long term, typically we do get the collections as far as before the foreclosure process. Where I see the issues in the future are values and appeals. And that would be for the 1/1/2021 tax year. Right now, the budget is comprised for the 1/1/20 tax year. Our assessment date, the assessment date of 1/1/2020 means we use 2019 sales for our valuation. And so where COVID mostly impacted areas of the United States after 1/1/2020, we won't see that impact on the tax roll for valuation until next year. And then we'll most likely see appeals from certain sectors, most likely the hospitality sector, some of the utility sectors. Believe it or not, we actually have assessed value for airlines. And so airlines have been impacted. That's one of our smaller areas, but that is a unique valuation section that the department helps us out with. And legislation. Legislation right now, since the special session, if it does meet, is most likely going to meet after the May 20th revenue forecast. And so legislation can have a direct impact on property tax dollars received by the county and districts. Again, the CAFA grant, I projected a downward projection of the CAFA grant because of potential for recordings, reduction in interest received. Areas that are probably not at risk, tax penalties actually might increase. However, those will have an option to go to BOPTA for appeal for the tax penalties. Foreclosure penalties, late filing penalties, miscellaneous sales, and DCBS fee revenue service charges, those aren't at risk. And so moving on to the next slide. So our expenditures are pretty normal with normal growth, minor growth. We do have a couple of changes that did make in administration, and I'll explain those in a few slides from now. Total FTE is +1, and that +1, again, I'll go into in a little bit here in the administration area. We continue to meet or I would say barely meet our minimum statutory requirements with staffing. Staffing level by the Department of Revenue, last estimate was estimated to be at around 72, 74 positions. We're currently at 50 positions with the one ad for this year. They're far from optimal, but we get the job done. We would, again, like to do much more reappraisal and valuation of properties and enhance our level of customer service. But at this point in time, we're doing the best we can. We've been very efficient in the use of aid in the funds for the general resources, and we can continually look for ways to increase productivity, quality, and work output. I'll move to the next slide here. So, and are we having questions after the presentation, or is it okay if people interrupt me during the presentation? What's the chair prefer?
I'll just point out that the chair's general response has been that we'll do questions after presentations.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So administration comprises of currently myself, Krista, and Randy. Randy was a new position added as a management analyst for the current year. We converted a position to the management analyst position, so that is one change we did make. You'll notice on the administration on our cost for administration has gone up. That's one of the reasons why. The secondary piece for administration is as of the end of 2022, or actually it's the start of 2023, I will be retiring from the assessor position. So best practices is to have a deputy assessor or someone that can potentially move into that position, either if I happen to retire early, or if that person potentially would either go for an election, open election, or be appointed depending on the timing of the position. Of course, it doesn't guarantee that person a position as an assessor, but it does help keep a plan in action to have someone that can even transition. If there's another assessor that is elected, that person can help transition them into the assessor position. That is a limited duration position, 2 to 3 years maximum on that position. Administration, we do many areas as far as we have general direction and oversight of the department, do the budget, all the interdepartmental and intergovernmental relations. We work with the coordination of the departments, of our departments, sections, and between departments to A&T, and we generally provide support to the personnel personnel, and we also have a very robust public information website. Our website is, I believe, one of the best in the state. There's always things that we can do a little better on, but we're improving it every year as far as providing information to taxpayers. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Next slide, just some general GIFs or JPEGs from administration. You can see the administration area to the left. We're practicing the social distancing for COVID, and we're revising that as needed. Again, this is a kind of new territory for all of us, but I think we're being on the forefront of the COVID-19. We opened this week for 4 hours a day for customer service for the trimester payments. And so it's a kind of trial to see how that works. We're doing best practices and also serving our customers the best we can. Some of the other graphs there are, one of them is an indication of number of accounts and expenditure per account. And I believe to FTE, and it's Lane County. If you look at the bottom, we're very much at the bottom as far as for FTE and expenditures statewide. And then the second graph over, the staffing at counties below $2 permanent rate, it just shows you that the staffing for primarily the ONC counties has dropped over the years. We did drop a number of positions in 2012 and 13, and we recovered a couple positions, but we're still well behind the curve on where we were back in 2012, 13. And of course, the property tax dollar, if you notice that the 47 cents should be 46 cents. This is actually last year's, and the 32 cents should be 31 cents. And so we'll get that updated. I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So an appraisal, the two main divisions besides admin and assessment taxation is appraisal and property tax records, or property tax management. Appraisal, main purpose is to value property 100% of real market value as of January 1st of each year, including standards set forth by the Department of Revenue for mass appraisal. Their appraisal is responsible for accurately calculating maximum assessed value. As you know, that's a component of Measure 47 and then Measure 50 that passed back in the mid to late 90s. We do a special assessment and determine the yearly annual adjustments in our ratio report each year. We are doing limited reappraisal work. Due to COVID, we did put that on hold. People necessarily really don't want someone knocking on their door to appraise their property in the COVID situation. We'll starting back up at some point in time as we work into the phases of reopening, but we'll make sure to use social distancing and other areas to make sure that we're cognizant of any requirements that are in place. Teleworkers, we've had a large portion of our staff, more than half, doing telework, and they're doing mostly project work and valuation work from home, and also completing their continuing education hours. They're being, I believe, being very productive in their use of time at home. It is again, a work in progress, and we'll see as far as we move into later on into the season, when we have to do physical reappraisal and have to finish getting the values in the tax roll, how that telecommunication portion does work. And of course, it depends on the phases we're on. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is just some pictures. You might recognize some of the pictures because they're fairly close to us as far as the construction being done right across from the PSB. I believe that's either the Gordon Hotel or this the housing as far as across the PSB and the Graduate. Just some general pictures of houses being built. Again, a large portion of the appraisal work is spending time in the field, valuing commercial property, industrial property, multifamily, and anything that the state doesn't appraise. The state primarily appraises utilities and very large industrial manufacturing. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Property tax management. Property tax management does a lot. Not that, and I guess all the sections do a lot, but property tax management, they do the collections and distributions, the use assessment calculation on the tax side, ownership, property changes, exemptions, senior deferral, annexations. It is, again, quite a lot of work that we get done. Regarding COVID-19 specific items for COVID-19, we are providing only telephone assistance and email assistance to the public, except for this week. We'll follow the county guidance as we open up for different phases, for phase 1 and 2. and 3. But right now, up until this week, we were doing just the phone and the email assistance to the public, and that was working fairly well. This week, we've had, I think we've had about 50 customers in the last 2 days. That's about half what we had last year for being open. So it's kind of just an indicator of where we're at. Typically, it's much more than that as you get further into the week, further into towards the 15th for the trimester due date. In fiscal year 2021, we're still trying to accept credit cards in the office. We're running into some PCI compliance issues. However, we did move and have a addition of a IVR system for our phones, so customers can pay not only online, but they can pay over the phone system and call and make their credit card payments or debit or check payments. We also have a phone available in our public information area for customers to make their payments there on that phone. One big change that we're having for the department is that the U.S. lockbox service is going away. That's the service that we do use to process our payments out of the Portland area. We're moving that in-house, and we'll be processing all payments in-house with our own equipment and own staff. And so the ultimate net effect of that cost-wise is probably going to be pretty net neutral, but we'll probably have a report for next budget season for that, for the full cost. But I expect it to be pretty neutral as far as in costs. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Just some general pictures of some of the areas for property tax management. We do touchless payments. Taxpayers can make their payments in the lower area of the public service building without entering into our customer service area. We're also working with elections to procure one of their drop boxes. In the past, we have been using elections drop boxes in various areas around the state to help with the COVID-19. We're going to have a permanent drop box across from the PSB exclusively for payments. So we'll have that year round, again, to help out with the COVID-19 and to provide additional assistance to taxpayers for making payments so they don't have to come in, they can just drive by. We're in the process of getting that painted right now, I believe. We'll go ahead and the videos to the left of the screen, I can't play the videos, but if you get a chance, watch those videos. They're great as far as they're headed by the Tax Association, and particular thanks to some of our staff members that did put extra time into developing these. They're videos, everything from where does the tax dollar go to personal property, to valuation and general information. Some really great videos out there, and I've used them a lot to help direct taxpayers for questions. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So highlights of outcomes for 1920. We had 18,000 plus public information contacts, 8,500 plus property inspections. We digitized this past year. We contracted with a company to digitize our tax records, close to 4 million tax records. Those are on microfiche, microfilm. That was quite a project. That is just finishing up right now. It goes to our goal of having our records digitized and scanned in. Not only does that help the efficiency of our operations, but it helps keep the records, digital records, and I believe it helps taxpayers out in the long run that we were able to provide records to them much quicker. Also, the microfiche, microfilm are degrading as time goes on, it starts to degrade down, and this will save the degrading of the microfiche, microfilm. Ownership changes, about 15,000 ownership changes that are processed, 2,700 boundary line changes. Those include subdivisions, partitions, boundary line agreements, deeds recorded with different legal descriptions and such. Our real market value has increased to $65 billion in real market value. We're at 100% of real market value as of 1/1/19, and we're currently working on the ratio study for 1/1/20. $580 million in taxes were certified this prior year. And we had so far about 195,000 property tax payments. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Some challenges and opportunities. Challenges, again, is COVID-19's impact on property taxes. I've reached out to the state of Oregon economic advisors and the IWAO and also some banking industry experts to talk about what happens when, say, for example, someone's mortgage is in forbearance. You know, will we get paid our property taxes? Items such as that. Just a lot of those questions that will help estimate the exact tax or close to the best possible exact property tax dollars that we'll collect and certify for next year. Again, appeals are unknown. Even though that the appeals date is 1/1/2020, we'll probably still get an increased number of appeals because everyone's going to be looking at the bottom line closer and closer. And again, values. We're looking at values for 1/1/20 now. We're still seeing an upward tick in values for the most part. Commercial, industrial, not so much. Residential still is a strong market as a 1/1/2000. Challenges include process changes just due to the COVID. Again, the one-time opportunities we've worked on is the scanning microfiche project, which I mentioned. We are looking at eventually replacing our assessment taxation software. It is dated. I helped implement it back in the RFP was 96, I think, somewhere around there. We implemented in 98, 99. So we've had it over 20 some odd years. So it's a client server software that is outdated. And we're also looking at using potentially a mobile assessor module that will interface with our software so our appraisers can use more modern techniques in the field with digital devices such as iPads or Surfaces to help streamline the process of data entry. Let's see, some of the other challenges include federal bills. We really don't know if there's going to be any help for taxpayers that are hardest hit for property taxes. We currently don't have any mechanism for taxpayers that are hardest hit. That's really up to the state. We're set by statutes for a lot of the authority that I do have. Legislation, obviously, limited staffing. The CAFA grant, I estimated that down. Last year, I think we had 15 to 16% of our expenses. This year, I estimated that down to just a little under 15% to account for a potential impact by COVID-19 and reduced recordings potentially. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next slide is Lane County Strategic Plan, just how we fit in. And I won't go through it and read all the aspects. But the bottom line is that A&T is an integral part of Lane County and the strategic plan and future plans. We're always part of either being a part of the development of those plans, or we definitely give our thoughts and opinions and follow the plans as best as possible with our resources that we do have. And go ahead and go to the next slide. And that's it. I think I might be over my time. I apologize if I am, but that's all I have. I'm open for questions. Should I go ahead and call Chair, or should I, does it, Jay was first, I believe.
Jay, will you go ahead? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Thank you.
Couple quick questions, Mike. I look at you guys as a revenue generating department for the rest of the county. You talked about 11% comes to Lane County, so that means 89% is going to everybody else.
Correct.
How much do those folks pay?
They pay directly nothing. the taxpayers do the paying for all the costs. As far as those 84 other districts, we do not receive direct funds from those districts.
What's the total amount of property tax you collected last year?
Last year we certified it was 580 something thousand. I can check the June 30th report. It'll be just a second here, and I can find out in just 1 second. And I probably have another question asked while I'm looking this up really quick.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, the other question I have is about your on-site appraisals and valuations. What's the schedule of rotation around the county? How often would you get back to a real property? How many years would it take between actual physical appraisals of a property, or even an aerial photo review of a property in Lane County? It seems to me that we're leaving a lot of money on the table by improvements that go unassessed.
About 20 plus at the rate we're at right now. So 20 plus years would be the rate. Originally, before ballot measure 4750, it was 6 years, and we were on cycle to do the 6-year cycle. We laid off a significant number of staff when those measures did pass. And so right now we're at 20 plus years. Some properties haven't been looked at for over 30 years. Some properties have been looked at last year. So we are doing chunks of reappraisal. I believe we're finishing up in the residential areas of Springfield. At least we were planning to this year. And then I think the COVID is going to kick us back a little bit. Then we'll have the next area, most likely will be Eugene area, focusing on areas that have changed, such as maybe the Whitaker area and the Brewery district that's been revamped a lot over the last 5 years or so. But to answer your question regarding the property tax collection, my computer screen just came up here. I'll put it in the chat section in a few minutes here, if that works for you, and I'll find it.
Yeah, that'll work. It's a big amount, and 89% of that's a big amount. And if we can get a small portion of those districts to chip back into your department, we could hire appraisal staff and cut that 20 years back down to that 6 or 7 and increase revenues, even though they would actually be paying money to the county to support that staff. We could probably increase revenues to those districts because we would actually have a closer valuation to what's actually out there. And I guess my final question would be, are we doing anything similar with personal business property? Are we ever going on site and double checking what's submitted by businesses?
We do. We have an appraiser that does part of their work doing personal business property taxes. They do some spot checks as far as on site for businesses. Very limited on site inspections, but they are spending more and more time going over the returns that are sent back. Previously, we would spend probably very little time and just be more of a data entry function. And now we do desk audits on all new filings. And so all the new filings are audited at the desk. And then I got out in the field on some of those properties that report nothing. And they're viable businesses in the county. We're trying to focus on businesses that are more, not the mom and pop business. I mean, I wouldn't say mom and pop, just not the de minimis businesses that are below the threshold, that not to try to, as much as possible, encumber businesses that are businesses that most likely are going to be underneath the threshold. But it's hard to sometimes initially gauge who's over the threshold, under the threshold. But I believe we're doing a good job, at least as best as possible. It would be nice to go out to more of those properties and do some reviews, but I want to do that consistent with commercial property evaluation, residential evaluation too, and not just focus on one area.
Yeah.
And to answer, I'm sorry, I was going to say, to answer your question, so the total certified taxes were roughly 580 and $81 million. And so $581 million that if
517 million.
Yep, and the collection's typically around 98% over time. It's about 96%, you know, when you look at a handful of years, but about 98%, that considers also the 2% discount or 3% discount, depending on what discount's being used by the property taxpayer. So our collections are very good.
So even if you took 89% and then 96%, you're still at 496 million that we're collecting for other people that don't put a dime into the system. It seems like a very small portion of that coming back to A&T would actually increase that amount for them and the county by being able to keep up with our assessments.
I believe, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm done with my questions is all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I was just going to mention that, if you just took 1% of that 400 and some odd million, that would cover our general fund contribution, I believe, to our fire department. So it'd be close to it. Larry.
Okay. Go ahead, Larry.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Mike. I have one question, but before, I'm just, your challenges are amazing. Your staffing, DOR says you should have 72 FTEs and you have 50. And this has been going on for a lot of years. I just want to say, in spite of it, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
So my question has to do with materials and services, which is down 206,000 for the year. And I can see, it looks like about 170,000 of it is the decrease of the microfilm.
Correct.
That was in here. But also this year, direct technology services went down from 328,000 to 236,000. Any reason for that?
There was an allocation change as far as if you look on, there's some of the cost for the software actually was moved to a different allocation area, a code area. So one area went up, one area went down.
Okay.
And overall, the increase was slight because we do have an escalator clause for our software, but overall it's probably very close.
Okay.
And then you mentioned about the scanning project. Yes, that was a scanning project that dropped off for a prior year, for this year, actually, for next year.
Okay, thanks, man.
Other questions from committee members? Yes, Commissioner Burney.
Thank you. A few questions, Mike.
Yes.
And I'll precede all these by saying that I know I owe you a phone call, and I thank you for that task you did that we still need to dig into.
Sounds good.
First, Symantec, I would not consider you a revenue generator at all. I would consider you a bill collector. And to me, those are different things.
Actually, both. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to piggyback off of a couple of things Jay stated, and I want to kind of go a different direction. What would it take to establish a 1% processing fee for collection of and dispersal of taxes to different taxing districts?
It would take an act of the legislature to do that. And I've testified several times over the years for several bills that have been similar to that or modifications of that. And the bottom line is the taxing districts, they're great partners, but they're getting the service for essentially for free. And they have had pushback as far as for providing a reduction in their revenue they receive from us. And the argument back could be that, by decrease of 1%, you might gain 4%. That would have to be shown in a trial program. When we did our personal property trial program, I guess about 5 years ago, we showed a very quick return on investment for the money that was spent on our department. That was grant funds.
Well, I'll tell you what, as a new member of the Board of Commissioners Legislative Task Force, I would sure entertain a request from you to us with an example of what those dollars were purchased and what the cost, benefit, and business model would look like, so that maybe we could track, maybe even propose legislation as it relates to that. I don't know. I'm a novice at this, but I think other counties might agree. So that's
one from the other member, Joe.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Farr. Mike, why would forbearance, which keeps the property, which assists monthly payments, why would that in any way affect revenue due?
Well, forbearance, someone has to pay the taxes. Yeah,
I understand, and maybe someone has to pay the mortgage. It's usually the same person.
So if you have a forbearance on property taxes, the short-term collection, if the property taxes aren't paid by the bank or the property tax or the homeowner, the money doesn't come in as a distribution from the districts. It might come in eventually.
It will come in eventually, but cash flow wise, you don't know how that will impact the operation.
That's why I put the short term aspect, where you might not see forbearance in the future is on some of the business personal property or businesses. If they go out of business, it's difficult to collect sometimes the full amount of taxes for certain areas. So certain companies or properties that do go out of business, we may see a drop because of the personal property. The real property, it's going to be more on the appeal side for evaluation of that.
Thank you, Mike. Just two more things. One is, my understanding is, I know you're going to correct me, is that when you assess property, you only assess the tax against something like 70% of the real value. Is that correct?
So there's two primary values on the property tax statement. One's the Measure 5 real market value, which essentially is the same as a market value when a willing buyer and seller would pay for a property. Then there's an assessed value. The assessed value is what you see in your tax statement. And without getting into the minute details, that typically is right around a little under 70%. Some of that range, it varies. And that's due to Measure 47 and 50. And so each property will be different because when Measure 47 and 50 passed, it took the 95 value minus 10% every year, increases 3%, and there's exceptions to that.
I understand all that, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just what I was leading to though was, unless there is some sort of a hugely dramatic decrease in property values, I don't see even COVID-19. I don't see it really impacting the amount of taxes due the county. Is that how you see it, or am I missing something?
Well, I'm looking back from experience. Back when we had the recession, we had property values drop significantly, and they dropped actually below the maximum assessed value of many properties. I believe up to 26% of the properties in the county had real market value below the maximum assessed value. So during that time period for those districts, they did see negative growth or didn't see their 3% increase in taxes.
No, thank you very much. I'll show you how naive I am. When you talked about the total assessed value that you collect on, I presume that's what you collect on. So I presume that excluded the cities of Eugene. No, that included Eugene and Springfield, correct?
Yes, includes all 85 tax districts.
Do you have charts that show the entire value of property in Lane County over time?
We have charts that show value change year by year that we have on our website. Yes, not for all the districts, I believe for the major districts. And it is on our website for the public to see, as far as it's also usually included with our press release. But it's year over year, not like a 5-year trend or 10-year trend. We have had slides in the past with like a 10-year trend, and that's something I can work up if that's needed. Okay.
Last thing, and thank you all for your indulgence. I'm going to use this to focus on something that's philosophical, but I'm just going to use the example being something you described to us. And I think you said that you're changing your payroll services.
So we have a U.S. Bank.
U.S. Bank.
Our lockbox service.
Right. And now you're going to be doing that internally.
Yes. Yes.
And my understanding is you saw no net cost to your office by doing that.
That's yet exactly to be seen, but that's my projection.
Okay. I just believe that if there's no increase in cost, it's always preferable to hire people rather than to contract services to groups that you know will not be paying the same level of wages and benefits as internal hires. And that's the only point I wanted to make. And so thank you for allowing your statement for me to make that point. But it's a point that I think all departments and divisions ought to look at, which is when we're contracting for services, if it's something legitimately that we have the capacity to do internally and it won't increase costs, we ought to look at that. So thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chair.
And can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, okay? No? Okay.
Yep.
Very good, thank you. Other questions?
I'll just
My
make
video is
this,
getting a little fuzzy. Chris Hazen, go ahead, please.
yeah, I'll just make this a request for follow-up, Mike. If you could share with the committee any information about the challenge/opportunity on the software side that you alluded to. And by the way, nice to see you again. It's been a couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none and hearing none. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
You bet.
See you later.
Okay. See you, Mike. Anybody, is everybody okay with us moving forward into county council? And is Steve Dingle on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, Steve. Thank you.
Can the other members hear me? Okay, good. You want me just to go ahead and start?
Let's do it, Steve.
All right. Good afternoon, Budget Committee. My name is Steve Dingle. I'm the Lane County Council. I've been in the Lane County Council since 2013. I know a couple of you have been through this process with me before, so I apologize if it's repetitive, but for the new members, I think it's useful to give just a little bit of background about me and what I consider to be the mission of our office. I was a prosecutor for a number of years, and I went to work at the Department of Justice in their trial division, where I found a niche and specialized in defending employment-related cases. I was recruited by Alex Gardner to come to work for Lane County in January of 2012. And one of the primary missions when I got here was, number one, to make sure that we had the right mix of talent so that we weren't paying a lot of money for outside counsel. That meant that we needed to bring in some labor and employment experience, which I've done. The second thing was to basically come up with a philosophy that it's cheaper to be proactive. In all my trainings that I do, management by litigation is very, very expensive. So the idea was to come up with programs that would reduce the county's risk profile, reduce the amount of claims and the number of claims and the amount of those claims. So some of the things we've done to do that are, for example, with our workers' comp program, with our managing within the law training program, and some other things. Number two was to analyze claims early and develop a process. In other words, if there is a valid claim and we have done something wrong, it is much cheaper to pay that claim early and up front. And more importantly, is to come up with a process so that we can show people that they believe that they have the feeling that they've been treated fairly. My experience is as a litigator is that many, many times claims move on simply because people believe that they have not been heard. And I would say it uses a great example, the process that we've developed for handling some of the one of our routine class of claims, which are paint claims, people's cars who are damaged by paint claims. We have a process where I believe the vast majority of people, even when the claim is denied, feel like they've been treated fairly and feel like there's an objective process. Also, I would like to thank, I've got on the line my risk manager, Lisa Lacey, and I also have my workers' comp administrator, Miranda Rollins. So if you have some questions that are related to that, they're here to help. And I also like to thank the budget staff for helping me put together this presentation. So we've got the slide up. It talks to you about the department overview. For those who don't know, the county counsel office is the legal counsel for the county. So that means we do everything, with some very narrow exceptions that are very very technical and very specific, where it's cheaper to pay for that expertise outside the office than it is to have someone on board. So legal services are the things that you would traditionally think that lawyers do: contracts, litigation, labor and employment, land use, those sorts of things. And then we also have risk management and workers' compensation underneath the Office of County Counsel, and that's simply because it makes sense. We have a lot, obviously, risk helps manage the department's risk profile, make sure that we get adequate insurance from vendors, people that we contract with, and then also workers' compensation, because we are self-insured. We pay every dime of medical expenses and time loss, so it's important that we manage that program, and that's been, quite frankly, one of the big success stories. You'll see in some later slides that we've reduced the amount of claims and the cost per claim, and that is to a great extent by being proactive. And that is working with departments to lower that. I can give you a great example with the Sheriff's Office if someone wants to ask about it later. So the next slide. As you can see, the sole source of revenue for the department is the indirect plan. We do bill out attorney time. That was another one of the things that I did when I got here. I thought it was important to move the office into the 21st century and make it a more like, and I believe now we are indistinguishable from a private law firm. And a private law firm means that you account for your time, you provide billable hours, and you provide detailed service, just like if you went out and retained an attorney yourself. So our clients have the ability to see an invoice that looks just like you would from a private attorney. Next slide. We're not at risk for any revenue changes as a result of COVID. I would tell you that a couple of issues have come up, questions you might have, and I'm prepared to answer those. So, for example, we have not had any COVID-19 related workers' compensation claims. There have been some complaints made to OSHA that have been investigated by OSHA and determined that our response to the COVID-19 issue in the workplace is appropriate. And next slide. There you can see the budget details, and as you might expect in a department like mine, it is really personnel driven. I will tell you that I think we do an excellent job of leveraging our personnel things. We've done a lot with adopting a document processing program that didn't exist when I was here. We're nearly and virtually paperless. I'm also very proud of our work with and partnership with law clerks. We get a great deal of value with those law clerks. Sometimes those law clerks come to work for us, but I will say it gives them a great experience, and we get good value for our money. Next slide. And here it is. Here's our mission. And I really want to emphasize that. My goal was to treat one of my pet peeves, having worked in government my entire life. I always felt that I was a bit disrespected as a government lawyer. Many times I was said I was not a real lawyer. And so one of the things that I did when I came to the office was to make our office run like a professional modern law office. And that included getting a document management system, helping clients save money, and that a private citizen would have to a private attorney. Next slide. And here's some highlights, and they do give you a really good idea of the kinds of things that we do. We did, when I got here, we did through it with work with HR, developed the Managing Within the Law series. Again, I can only tell you what I cleaned up afterwards when I got here, but since I've been here and we've implemented this program, there's been a dramatic decrease in the kinds of claims that were made by employees, both through their unions and through litigation. We were not very aggressive in collecting subrogation and third-party claims. We do that now. What does that mean? That means that if someone hits our employee, for example, at work, and they're at fault, we, of course, pay for the employee's medical expenses and time loss. But what I'm saying is we are aggressive in going back and seeking subrogation in those claims back from the other person's insurance company. Contract review, Jim Chaney has done an outstanding job of simplifying that process, making it more user-friendly, and at the same time improving the quality of the contracts that we produce and limiting our exposure there. And then there's just some general metrics that you see there, which I think are really good. It's not absolutely scientific, but at least it's something to look at. Is when you can, and that is when you look at the average cost per claim and the amount of money spent, the number of claims. It helps, at least gives you a trend and shows you that you're working in the right direction. Finally, the other thing I would say here too is, as an overarching thing, is that when we come up with our composite rate that we charge counties, it is way, way, way less than the private sector, even considering people who are fully loaded. I had the distressing fact of finding out when we went and did my rate that apparently, because I turned 60, my value went down according to the Oregon State Bar. So my hourly rate dipped by $50 this year.
Welcome to the club.
But we don't, but just as a by way of comparison, I think my hourly rate, according to the Bar Economic Survey, is something like $350 an hour, and it gets billed out at to the clients at $78 an hour. So that gives you an idea of the value that the clients are seeing. And most importantly, that number doesn't mean anything unless the clients believe they're getting value. And one of the things that I've preached is quick and good advice, because that was one of the things that wasn't happening. Is if you're not responsive as someone's lawyer, eventually people will just they'll get frustrated and then take sort of their best guess as to what they do, which unfortunately many times for people who don't have legal training is not the right decision. Next slide, please. And this is where we fit into the Lane County Strategic Plan. I know I'm going a little bit fast. I noticed from Mike's presentation that there are some questions, so I want to be sure and leave time for that. Final one, I think, is just questions, right? Next slide.
Yes.
Oh, okay, there we go. So I know that's a lot, that's quick, but if you have specific questions, I'm here to answer them, and I also have my other folks. I see Ms. Leslie. Okay, I guess she gets unmuted. Oh, there you go. Okay.
We're ready for questions, Steve. So, Dawn, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I heard a comparison to some degree, although maybe not a dollar metric, comparing county council services to the private sector. But I was curious about if you have done any metrics comparing 11 FTE for county council to other counties' legal services. So, you know, when I heard the deputy present, or the sheriff present, he talked about number of deputies per 1,000 population, and was able to draw a comparison with staffing in other counties. Do you have that kind of metric for this legal case representation?
I do not at my fingertips, but I can certainly get that information.
Thank you.
I'll put that out on the listserv and ask for that. My sense is, from my experience with other folks, is that we are probably a little bit on the low side compared to, and that just has to do with the way the funding is. If you compare us to like Multnomah and Washington and Clackamas, we're definitely lower than them.
I would think it would be difficult to determine apples to apples too if they're using some private and some in-house. I would think it'd be important to be able to true up what number means what. But anyway, any information.
That's actually a really good point, because one of the things that's happened since I arrived here is that I have brought a lot of those things in-house, and you're absolutely correct. It is, for example, I know that Marion County contracts out a lot of their litigation, for example. We do 99% of our litigation is in-house, unless we have a conflict, or it's a very specialty area. So that's a good question, and I'll get that information for you.
Maybe it would be maybe a better comparison would be compared to a county that does it in-house.
Okay.
Other questions from committee members? Yes, Chris, please.
Yeah, great question, Steve. Thanks for the presentation. Are there any sort of pending matters that could pose a risk to the county in the future? Sort of unsettled litigation.
Yes, there is. There's one very large one involving a claim involving Lane County Behavioral Health. It's over $20 million. We are currently suing the federal government because that claim arises out of our work through the Lane County Behavioral Health Center, and we believe that it should be covered by that we should be indemnified by the federal government under the Federal Tort Claims Act, and that's the one area, that's the specific area of the specialty litigation that I was mentioning.
Other questions from committee members? I can't. Oh,
Yes.
There's one. I see it. Commissioner Burney, go please.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. In the chart, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was looking at costs, but it did not include, nor probably should it, the costs of settlements and other kinds of payments that the county has had to make. Is that correct?
No, I believe I believe Lisa may want to jump on that, but I believe that does include the cost. Those are claims.
Oh, does it? Okay, well, clarification if you could, then that'd be great.
Let me make sure that's correct. Lisa, can you?
And while you're looking, I'm sorry.
It does not include the cost of the settlement. That comes up under general expense from the self-insurance fund, but it does cover the cost of the attorney's time.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you. In addition to the line item, is there, I think I would be curious to look at, is there some sort of a chart where we can look at year by year over maybe the last 5-6 years, what that's looked like for the county, or would that be too difficult?
I think, Lisa, we can do that, can't we?
We have that in the annual risk report. I can send that to the budget office to distribute.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Other questions from committee members? My screen's a little fuzzy. Anybody speak up if they got an additional question for Steve? Okay, hearing none. Appreciate it, Steve.
All right. Thank you very much, Budget Committee members, and we'll get you that follow-up information as soon as I can get it. It sounds like Lisa's will come quickly, and I'll see how quickly I can garner that information from my colleagues.
Thank you.
Great. And then let's take a 5-minute break and return at about 4:02, and we'll go from there. Let's see, next up, we have county administration. Looks like it's split between Greg and Steve. Please take it away.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. This is Steve Moker-Heisky, County Administrator, and Greg Rickoff, our Director of Operations, is also on the call. We have staff from County Administration here if you have additional questions when we're done. So Greg and I will sort of tag team this presentation. We're going to try to be brief here because we know we're a little behind schedule and you've had a lot coming at you. So we can go to the next slide. And briefly, the mission of county administration is the same as the mission for the county. I think as the committee members know, our focus really is implementing the policies and priorities and goals as established by the Board of Commissioners. So we really have a county-wide scope and focus. There are several pieces. County administration is broken into several different divisions. You heard from parole and probation last week, and you'll hear from about the Board of Commissioners tomorrow. But today we're going to talk about the administration division within county administration and the operations division. Next slide. So this is revenue, as you've seen from other departments, and just real briefly, the big categories of revenue. You see the administrative charges. That's the countywide indirect plan that gets charged out to all departments based on the formula that we use for other internal indirect services. We also have video lottery resources that fund economic development, some court fees from our justice court operation, as well as recording fees. And you'll also see, I'll point out real briefly, the property and rentals, that $5 million number is in the capital fund, and it's related to anticipated future bonds that will be sold for a portion of the construction of a new developmental disabilities facility. So that's really one-time resource. Next slide.
Okay, I think that's me. My name is Greg Rickoff. I am the Director of Operations. Just really quickly, we do also have on the line with me Cheryl Betchart, the County Clerk, Robert Tintle, the Treasurer and Financial Services Manager, as well as Mike Penwell, the Capital Projects Manager. The highlights here, just a quick reminder, the Board of County Commissioners did purchase a building recently for the COVID-19 recovery. We do plan to be using it in the future as a shelter and navigation center. That took about $1.8 million that we hope to see some reimbursement from the state on. We have also talked a little bit about developmental disabilities, fairly large piece of construction, $11 million in that construction, 14.7 if it was fully loaded. Just a reminder that in the upcoming year, we will have the largest election in the history of Lane County. Might be true elsewhere as well, but with the Motor Voter Act, we'll have roughly 262,000 registered voters receiving ballots, and our regular staff of 5 will balloon up to about a staff of 155 to handle that election. I want to talk real quickly about the facilities division. I see it this department here, and that is inaccurate. It was in the current year, it started out in Public Works. It has been transferred to operations in that. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback on the phone. Is that me or is that other people hearing that as well? If somebody can mute, that'd be helpful. Okay, we do have a proposal for a number of new positions. The facilities moved to operations this past year, in part due to a study that was conducted. Strategic Advisor Facilities Consultant did a study in 2019. It was eye-opening, to say the least. It did call for the wholesale redesign of the facilities division. A lot of work with administration, needing a stronger strategic vision, reorganization, and a lot of work in communication. But one of the things that the study did point out, and you'll see in this proposal request for 2 new custodians, 1 new maintenance worker, and a program specialist. I would want to call your attention to the fact that the Lane County numbers, we ask each and every staff person to cover 9,600 square feet of space in every hour of the day that they're working. That is twice the average. The survey came through saying very clearly that if we wanted to meet our peers in the field, we would need to add 13 FTE and custodians alone to meet that. We thought 13 might be a little bit ambitious. We do have the request for 2. The maintenance workers had the same kind of issues where they were covering 120,000 square feet per maintenance worker. The benchmark has the average being at 21,000 square feet. So we're asking our maintenance workers to cover about 100,000 square feet more than what is the national recommendation. And we're about roughly between 1/2 to 1/4 of what our peer organizations cover. So we are asking for those positions to help start with the recovery of that function. We also have in the budget request a new accounting analyst position in financial services. This is a unit that has really not had the ability to keep up with the demand that's been placed on them. When the cuts were made in 11 and 12, we really cut into muscle when we looked at financial services. We simply removed the purchasing and procurement function. Thank you, county commissioners and budget committee members, for replacing that function about 2 years back. We've needed those positions, and it's really made a difference. This accounting analyst position would be looking at all of the work that has increased with the counties increasing in size. We also have remarkable demands in our auditing. Anybody who's had a chance to keep up with the GASB requirements for our auditing assessment, they are extensive and they are ongoing, and it's a daily affair. So we do have the request to look at that added position. And I think that's it for that slide. Next slide.
So I can take this, and I'll just make a note on the additional positions that Greg noted are part of the administrative charges, our indirect plan. And so the cost of those positions are shared across the organization as part of the indirect plan, because the entire organization benefits from those internal services. So, immediately our administrative charges, the indirect plan is not at risk, although the health of the entire organization and revenue throughout the entire organization certainly over time impacts the ability of our indirect plan, the ability of the organization to fund the indirect plan. So there is a direct correlation between the financial health of the entire organization and our ability to deliver the necessary internal services. The one other resource impact I would note is you saw video lottery as our sole source of funding for economic and community development. That is a place that we're really concerned with, and the latest information, Christine can correct me if I'm wrong, from the state is that they've seen a more immediate reduction in video lottery funds, and there's that funding source allows the state to collect its portion to pay off video lottery bonds first. And so local governments that receive video lotteries are sort of in the downstream of that revenue. If there's enough available, then we'll get it. So I believe we've been told to expect, and I'm not sure, Christine, if it's for the quarter, but around a 50% reduction. Is that correct? Okay, we'll wait for Christine.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Sorry. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that's another area that we are, I think, in the budget message on the opening night, we shared with you video lottery, transient room taxes, and then state funding are really 3 areas that we're immediately concerned about. Next slide. So just a brief overview of the areas within county administration. And you'll see it's a long list. These are mostly 1, 2, 3 individuals within each of these shops. In administration, I believe we have 3, 2 to 3 FTE in budget and planning. We have 4 FTE in economic development. We have 3. Equity and access is 1 person. Our joint housing and shelter strategist is actually a shared position with the city of Eugene that is paid 50% by the city of Eugene, 50% by Lane County. That person is a county employee, Sarai Johnson, and she started just before COVID hit us, and she's doing a phenomenal job working in our EOC, supporting our homeless response efforts. Justice courts, I believe we have around 2.5 positions there. The law library is 1 FTE, public information is 1 FTE, strategic planning is 1 FTE, and we have 1 FTE in support for the Board of Commissioners. So a lot of functions, but and we have an incredible team of staff in county administration. Mr. Rickoff will talk about some of the other pieces that are under his portfolio in addition to these, but we have a great team of staff that are small and mostly one or small size shops and do a great job. The other comment I'll just make here, I'm not going to go through all the COVID impact areas, but just to say about 1/3 of our staff in county administration have been dedicated to the Emergency Operations Center really from the start of COVID-19 happening. So I'm having to remember all of their names because I don't see them in my office every day, but they are working directly in our emergency response, doing a phenomenal job. People, from Austin Ramirez to Judy Williams, Austin doing economic development and business community support, Sarai Johnson doing housing and homeless response, Devin Ashbridge, who's working in our Joint Information Center, Jeff Kincaid, who's a management analyst who's been doing work supporting all the property acquisition and logistics, and the list goes on and on. So we have a great team, and thankfully we've been able to allocate that staff to emergency response, and it really has benefited the success of our community efforts to date. A lot of work you see on the right side of the screen here that has gone into our emergency response efforts that I think most of you are familiar with, but really proud of the work that our team has done in supporting the rest of the organization in this rapid change. Over 750 employees have been transitioned to remote work. The Emergency Operations Center, the Joint Information Center, the respite sites, the purchase of the former VA clinic, all of those things, the small business loan program have really been great. Next slide. And Greg, this is you.
All right, that's me. Steve, when you were saying that, it also reminded me that we've asked certainly 1/3 of our folks have been temporarily reassigned, but a full half of folks have been dedicated to COVID. If you start including what Mo Young's been able to do in terms of facilitating leadership, Alex's time has been focused, Kyler's time has been focused almost exclusively on what's going on with COVID and making sure that the state funding and federal funding that we can receive, we are receiving. So it really has been a remarkable lift by a lot of folks. And those left behind have really had to pick up the I won't call it slack, but fill the opportunities that we need to continue that work. So operations is a function. You will note that parole and probation isn't included in this. It is within the department structurally, but not fiscally. The elements that are here really are the intergovernmental relations functions, the financial services, brand new facilities, and you've had a little bit of chance to work with Sean Waite, who is Health and Human Services Finance and Administration Manager. She's going to be joining my team and will be serving as the facilities manager starting in June, and we're really excited to have her. Up to this point, Robert Tintle has been doing double duty, both as the manager of the financial services unit and facilities. And then, of course, with Cheryl and the county clerk's function, one of the things that I would note about her programming is she, in her successful leadership, has had a number of career staff who have worked with her for the longest time. They're all coming up on retirement. So she has 3 new staff people and a new supervisor in elections. And it's all because folks have time limited out. And so she's doing all of her work with a very new team. I know Robert wanted to mention that we are seeing decrease in the yield to maturity in terms of our interest rates. That's truly across the board. We're working hard to invest here locally. We're also working hard to ensure that we get a good rate of return on our investments. And we're paying very careful attention to that. Should also mention that the facilities custodial services for you all who do have a chance to come into the building, facilities has done a remarkable job of stepping up to the challenge of keeping everything cleaner than we've had opportunity to before. We've added about 6 temporary FTE to cover the high touch spaces in all of Lane County's facilities to really make sure that we're taking care of those needs and keeping people safe. And then Alex has done a pretty remarkable job of making sure that dollars are, Alex and the emergency operations team. I have to tip my hat to Karen Gaffney and Patience Winningham. They've all done a remarkable job of ensuring that the federal and state dollars that can help us work with COVID are finding their way to Lane County. So next slide.
So we've talked about a few of these, the VA clinic, our new joint housing and shelter strategist, the great project at MLK that'll be opening later this year. You see in the middle there, the COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center, where so many of our county admin staff are assisting with our public health and other staff. And that's actually the Emergency Operations Center and Incident Command team in the conference room in the Charlton building. So that is our Emergency Operations Center. A lot of work has happened in the last year, in particular around housing projects in partnership with Homes for Good and other community partners, the MLK project we've mentioned, the upcoming fairgrounds project, and of course the VA clinic facility. The great work that Mo Young and our equity partners are doing on launching our Equity 2.0 initiatives, and that is now ramping back up again. And of course, Mo Young and Laura Vincent from Human Resources were recognized as 2 of the most outstanding female leaders in our community at the MLK Day event last year. Our bond rating was increased for the second time in the last 3 years from a AA2 to a AA1. That's the highest rating that Lane County has ever received. We're really proud of that. It's a reflection, we believe, of the strong financial management and work that we've done over several years. And then I'll just point out that fun picture on the bottom there was the dodgeball tournament we did in the pre-COVID era that seems like the days of innocence now. After hours, we held a charitable event to raise money for United Way. And so we raised several $1,000s through employee personal contributions. And our team didn't fare so well, but we had a lot of fun for a good cause. Next slide. So briefly on here, I think that you're all familiar with this, but these are just things that we're monitoring and focused on, and we know our challenges as well as opportunities going forward. Recovery, reopening and recovery is on everyone's mind. Concerns about reductions in state and federal funding. Housing solutions, including youth, as well as the homeless population. We had a homeless crisis before COVID, and it hasn't gotten any better. And I think our concerns are that it will, if anything, likely get worse after COVID, given unemployment and at-risk populations. And so knowing that we're going to have to do a lot of work in leading the response on that front. Election staff, there's just concern about brain drain there and transitioning with that team. Work on GASB and the implementation of our new financial reporting standards. Capital funds and just capital planning, it continues to be a challenge, but we're really proud of the work that we're doing to enhance work sites and workplace quality for various teams, including parole and probation and developmental disabilities and others. And then, you know, we talk about in county administration, one of the challenges we have is in many areas, we're one person deep. I mean, we have a really incredible team of folks who are the best individual contributors you can imagine in their roles, but they're one person deep. And so if someone goes out, it's a challenge. And so we're working on and continue to do planning and training around backups and support on that front. Moving forward, the rollout of our Equity 2.0 and just continuing to support our talented group of employees is a real focus. Next slide. And then our strategic plan, you see here, a lot of focus on, and this is reflective of the board's priorities in our strategic plan, a lot in the housing and homelessness area that you see on the left-hand side. Our 3 E's, equity, economy, and environment, as our focus on in vibrant communities. On that middle one, you know, the middle bullet there, fund and construct a new justice center, that, as you well know, is on pause for the moment as we work to get through this recovery effort, but continuing to work on areas of existing facilities that we can enhance for our staff. And then really focusing on our people, investments in our workforce, training and development. And you heard a lot about that from human resources, but it is where so much of our efforts have gone in the last few years as we've stabilized our budget, being able to recruit and retain the best talent, then making sure that we're developing our talent programs like our Emerging Leaders program, where we just continue to see people that go through that being promoted and excelling. We know we have great talent in this organization. We want to continue to grow that talent and move them throughout the organization. So we'll stop there, and hopefully we have a few minutes for questions.
Chair Vloderman, can you put me in the queue? This is Pat Farr.
Yes, Pat, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your question? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have a lot of questions, Steve, but I'm not going to bore everybody and take up a lot of time. Just very quickly, probably a chance to say hurrah and a success story. When we first began talking about what our COVID response was going to look like, it was our last meeting in Harris Hall in mid-March. I stated that I personally didn't want to see Lane County employees' paychecks diminished throughout the COVID period. I asked you how you were going to explore ways to make sure that staff didn't receive layoffs or any cuts in pay. Now, you just mentioned that over 750 employees have transitioned to remote work, and I know that in our health department, we're successfully conducting remote health care, including behavioral health, in a lot of ways that are going to help us not just today, but for the future, to reach out into the remote parts of Lane County. My question, Steve, is how have we fared during COVID in not reducing take-home pay for Lane County staff?
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. And yeah, that's accurate. We have not, and we really have led from the start to say we want to keep our employees safe and healthy, get as many people working remotely as possible. That also then allows the people that have to work on site, because their job requires them to be on site, to also be more safe and healthy in the workplace, because it's fewer people and the ability to maintain that social distancing. And we've said from the beginning, you know, we want to have our employees' backs. This is a time, we don't have too many employees in Lane County. I've been in county government leadership for 20 plus years in 3 counties and 3 states. And I've worked for organizations that have more staff, in my opinion, than they always needed in all areas. In this organization, that's not the case. We've been in the role of rebuilding this organization and increasing staffing where we can. Mr. Stoneberg indicated public safety continues to be a challenge for us. So the last thing we need to do, if we can avoid it, is and frankly, I think it's why we focused on things like managing healthcare costs and pension costs and managing our debt, as opposed to reducing our workforce or forcing cuts in pay. So we have not had layoffs, furloughs, or cuts in pay. And our goal is to use our reserves and to use our good financial management to create a bridge through this period to manage the impacts of COVID. What's really important is to know that we're declining revenue. So any significant increase, and we can't control that revenue trajectory, any significant increase in unexpected expenses is really going to be a challenge. That is the thing that will be difficult for us ongoing to use reserves for. So, you have an ongoing increase of some kind paired with that reduction in revenue, that will be a challenge. But to date, and our commitment is to do everything we can. I want layoffs or cuts in services or cuts in pay or furloughs or any of those things to be an absolute last resort.
Steve, thank you very much. Chair Lodeman, thank you. That is indeed a success story. And I think you're coming through on not reducing take-home pay for Lane County staff. Two things you said, Stephen, this is the last thing I'm going to say. I have two quotes of yours. You said the pre-COVID era seems like the days of innocence now, how true that is. And the second one is that in many areas, our administration team is one person deep. Thank you, Steve.
Other questions? Yes, Larry, please.
As far as facilities goes, the programs under operations shows a decrease of about $1,380,000. And yet on page 137, additional 4.0 FTE has been approved. Those seem to contradict each other.
Robert, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think Christine could touch on that too, because I believe that has to do with the transfer from Public Works. So it's a change in the budgeting process there. Is that correct?
Christine,
I'm having to unmute myself twice. Sorry, I've got some technology things going on. So could you repeat for me the page number, the first page number you were looking at?
135 shows a decrease in the program of facilities.
Okay, so
and then,
the addition of 4.75 FTE, is that the question?
Well, yeah, that's in total, but on page 137, it says additional 4.0 for facilities.
Right, so the 4.0 is facilities, so 4 of that 4.75, and then the 0.75 is actually the result of our current capital manager position changing from a full FTE down to a 0.75. And so the way we deleted that and have the new facilities manager position shows that increase of the difference, if that makes sense.
That does, but my question is, why does facilities expenses decrease by $1,380,000 when you're adding 4 FTEs?
Where are you seeing just facilities expenses?
Page 135.
So that's actually going to be all of operations is what you're seeing on page 135. So it's not just facilities in there. Facilities is just a piece of it.
Oh, well, it says just facilities. So.
Christine, this is Robert Tintel. So it's on it's on the table right above the last table, the FTE. So the third table, division financial summary by program, where it lists facilities.
Yes, I do see that.
And does this have to do with the transfer from Public Works with the road fund portion maybe staying within, or a portion staying within Public Works? Or you can see the 5.9 versus the 4.5. So if you can talk to that.
Correct, yes. So there is a piece of facilities that stayed with Public Works because they had combined some things when it was within their department. And so they made sure to separate things back out. If you want more detail on that, we can get that for you.
Yeah, if you can. And my next question on page 143, local revenues, special elections went from 500,000 to 50,000.
I can address that. This is Cheryl Betchart, the county clerk. So this is a normal election pattern, a cycle that we go through from the major election years to the non-major election years. Our revenue automatically reduces, and that is because when we bill for our election costs, we cannot charge the state for conducting that portion of the election, nor the cities. So there is a reduction in the revenue, and it's a historical pattern for the last 20-some years. So it is the cycle that we go through based on the major election years.
Thanks, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
On page 145, this is expenses. Agency payments went from 2,000 to 65,000.
I think we'll need to research and get back to you.
That's fine, good. And then lastly, on page 146, this one seems odd. Direct technological services went from 71,000 to a minus 128,000. How would there be a minus?
I can speak to that. So we have started a process where we reconcile back the TS charges after they've occurred. And so the 2021 budget includes a reconciliation of what actually happened back in fiscal year 18-19. And so if a department had budgeted a project, that's what the direct would be. It would be something specific to county admin, something that was supposed to happen and it didn't occur, then TS is going to give them a credit back.
Okay, that makes sense, Christine. And then the last one under that, department support direct went from 101,000 to 0.
And that is department support direct is something that was charged by Public Works when facilities was part of Public Works, and it's no longer there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? Yes, Chris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, Steve, congratulations on all your accomplishments with this team you've assembled. Very impressive, as you're well aware. Two quick questions, I think, on the facilities management staffing. The speaker, I'm sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's name, mentioned the person per square foot ratio at 50% less than your benchmarks. And I'm wondering if the county or if that team has measured the impact of that efficiency on the quality of facilities management, or is that just good, efficient facilities management? My second question, probably a different response, is about the COVID-19 recovery building that was purchased. And just kind of curious if the Lane Events Center could have served or is serving other functions during COVID-19 recovery besides the temporary shelter function that I know it's already serving.
All right, so this is Greg Rickoff, and I was the one who did use the statistics on the facilities. The survey that was undergone in 2019 was based in part on concerns about quality of service. It was raised as an issue in part by departments wondering, having a disconnect in terms of really understanding what they were paying for. And there was a need to really examine the function because many departments were asking for greater quality service, more engagement. We knew that we were very thin in that function. So I would say the quality of work was noticed. And Robert, do you see that differently? Is there anything you would want to add on that?
Yes, thank you, Greg. Again, this is Robert Tintle, Financial Services Manager and Interim Facilities Manager. One thing also to point out regarding the audit that was done, this audit, the facilities audit, is a great example of during the interim where there is not a performance auditor, this is, or even when there is a performance auditor, there is a, this is a great example of an audit that can be contracted out with an expert in the area. So this audit was performed by an individual who does have expertise in facilities maintenance and custodial work and construction and capital, and was able to look at all the benchmarks. And it was a performance issue and efficiency and effectiveness. And that is what they found, is after looking at it, that it wasn't just we were having a lower quality of service, but that we couldn't even get to the things, preventative maintenance that we needed to, or and some of those things that actually reduce your costs in the long run. If you maintain your buildings effectively as you go, then it reduces your costs going forward. And so those were just some of the things that they looked at. So in the absence of an internal performance audit, it's let's go outside, get an expert in this area, and that's where the results concluded from for this report.
You wouldn't know that, Chris, would you?
I'm laughing at your smiles, Joe. Yeah.
I'll answer just briefly the second question, Chris, about the recovery building. Lane Event Center is being used. The Expo building is sheltering around 150 unhoused individuals there. That has been a COVID response, largely to accommodate the reduction in capacity, both at the Mission and Dusk to Dawn. In addition, we've used the Wheeler Pavilion building, and I don't believe we had to use it as of yet, or if it has been used, it's been fairly minimal for any unhoused individuals that test positive or have symptoms but don't need to be hospitalized. Occupy Medical has been staffing that, while St. Vincent de Paul has been staffing the respite center. So the idea with the recovery building at the former VA clinic at 100 River Avenue is to move the operation that is what is otherwise at the Wheeler Pavilion there. And really the idea was to have a long-term using the Lane Event Center for homeless response efforts isn't going to work, as we get back to that operation is largely dependent not only on tax revenue, but fees from service. So we need to use those facilities for hosting events. It's been a great asset in this sort of short term because the event center has been shut down and we can use it. Also, again, I'll say, as I said on the opening night, that the former VA clinic, which we'll come up with a new name for, after COVID, after we get through the COVID public health response efforts, it is our plan to look at using that site as a longer term shelter and navigation center. So we do have a long-term planned use that's really, really critical. And then I want to just share one last thing that I mentioned, our Emerging Leaders Program. And as an example, you heard Cheryl Betchart, our outstanding county clerk, on the line, and she's hired a new election supervisor whose name is Drew Pryor. And Drew was a developmental disabilities employee and went through our Emerging Leaders Program, just someone who's been a great contributor in the organization and is now elevated to a supervisor role. It's been a really challenging position to fill. And so it's an example of the talent that we're growing in the organization that we're all really proud of.
Very good. Commissioner Bernie.
Hey, Steve, I want to thank you for mentioning that longer term strategic intention of using the veterans, what was once called the Veterans Clinic, because it really has been presented to the Budget Committee as if this was just a response to COVID-19. And if so, that would be a very expensive short-term response. But in fact, having lived through this a little bit, it also enables the underwriting of some strategic resource that we desperately need as it relates to our most vulnerable and unsheltered, which are with us, period. I just wanted to mention one thing. I was wondering if you could institute a declining leaders program. So I'm sorry, that was my attempt at humor because I need something besides caffeine. I just want the group to know that I came into
I'll be a member of it.
That I have nothing but kudos for the management of this organization, from Mr. Mokraheisky to Rickoff and to all those who've already been mentioned and who have not participated in this. I'm sorry, I'm pontificating, but to be able to be structurally balanced and have several key areas, Dale, public safety is one, there are others, have several key areas that aren't even hanging on by a thread, but somehow to keep this somewhat together as we really try to develop a more diversified and stronger portfolio of revenue for this county and its operations. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling and I'm taking your time. I apologize.
Other questions from committee members? Don't see any hands. I don't hear any voices. Okay. That ends it for county administration. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And I propose that we continue just to move forward with emergency management. Seeing nobody raise an eyebrow to that, we'll move forward. So is patience available?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll make this as short and sweet as possible as we close in for the evening. As you all know, and you've probably heard many times today, the Emergency Operations Center here at Health and Human Services building's been operating for quite some time. I'm actually calling in from there right now, and we've been working hard today on recovery efforts and planning for the next operational period and supporting our partners in the community and the steps that they're taking in response to COVID-19. So I'm changing gears quickly here, so work with me as we go. Emergency management historically has lived within the sheriff's office, and it was a 1.0 FTE person. There was one person for the whole program. Last year, I think it was February of 2019, when I came on board at Lane County, and the emergency management program was relocated to be its own department. And I have a 2.5 FTE program. I hired some staff. An emergency management analyst started this February in my program, and a program specialist started in October. So I've got some new staff, and we're hitting the ground running with disaster after disaster, and I'm having a lot of fun here. Next slide. So my program is currently funded by a grant from the Department of Homeland Security, specifically the Emergency Management Performance Grant. That grant comes with some strings attached. It has a standalone work plan that sets what we're required to work on at the state level and the federal level, focusing on our planning, our training, and exercise as an organization and with our community partners. So it's a little bit of a lift, but it keeps us moving forward to get to be able to respond to things like this. The administrative charges our county departments pay into the program, and that helps be part of the match. So EMPG is a 50% match requirement. Next slide. So during COVID-19 and ongoing costs, impacts to my funds are pretty limited. I have not had any intelligence that says otherwise, that there would be any particular changes to my funding stream based on EMPG or from the department's contributions. The federal government has taken advantage of some Stafford Act funds and reallocated and assigned a new funding stream. It's called EMPGS, and it's directly related to the response of COVID-19, and the state of Oregon is applying for that funds to the federal government. I'm not sure what types of strings attached will come with that funding, but I'd imagine we'll be hearing pretty soon what that could do for us at the local level. Next slide. So again, I called out, we have a 2.5 FTE program, so personnel is pretty limited. We're just getting going and getting through our plans, meeting staff, building those relationships, materials and supplies, pretty limited. Standing up an EOC, the board allocated $75,000 to emergency management this year to build out an emergency operations center component over on the Delta campus, and we continue to work on that. We're building a new office space for emergency management staff over at Delta as well. I think that's almost complete. We're about 2 weeks out from getting power turned on, and someday we'll get to go back to our office. That'll be great. Next slide. So I've alluded to this at the beginning. EMPG comes with a work plan and it outlines what we need to be working on. I've been here just over a year, and my primary focus is our emergency operations plan and getting that updated piece by piece. We've most recently updated our operational Annex 1, and that's how to activate an EOC. I think we've got that down. I think this is the third time now since I've been here at the county. And we'll continue to focus on disaster declaration process and roles and responsibilities of EOC staff. I'm also working on a community wildfire protection plan behind the scenes. I think we're presenting to the board in the middle of July with hopefully a final document. We'll be able to review that. And working with our partners. So there are a number of partners within Lane County that we support in emergency management. Those are all the cities, utilities, fire districts, hospitals, school districts, and making sure everybody has the information they need to respond in emergencies such as the one we're experiencing now. This is how we're building a common operating picture, overall situational awareness here in our community by sharing, and there are no questions. The preparedness piece, we continue to activate our EOC and train key staff for critical positions here in our EOC. So we've been functioning since March. I think we've got this training thing down, and I'd like to move on to mitigation planning if we could, please. Developing training and practicing all hazard emergency operations plans. So I alluded to it earlier. I've developed one portion of our EOP, our emergency operations plan. That's how to activate an EOC. The next step would be testing it. Who are the staff? How are we making the phone calls? Who turns the lights on? Those kinds of things. And I alluded to this earlier, liaisoning between the Eugene, Springfield County staff and other public agencies. So working with the nonprofits, NGOs, faith-based communities, universities, community colleges. I've heard this before. Lane County is from sea to summit, the size of Puerto Rico. There's a lot to do here. Next slide. The service impacts to from COVID-19 to emergency management. My 2.5 FTE staff, including myself, we've been here in the EOC supporting Health and Human Services and the organization overall in our response to COVID-19. We're slowly transitioning to recovery, and what does that look like? Supporting economic development, the housing, health and social services, and working with our partners to ensure that we can go the distance in our recovery from COVID-19. Again, we've been here since March 1st. So our work plan that EMPG sets for us, those other things that we get to do, we have to continue to move those forward because our program is tied to that federal funding. Next slide. So there's been a lot of great things in my first year here at Lane County. I'm still extremely excited to be here. And I've had some outstanding opportunities to test the EOC component and capability. One of the things that I was able to do in September was start an emergency supply program for staff, and it's solicit bulk discount prices for employees of Lane County and pass those through. And we were able to sell $32,000 worth of emergency supplies to our staff to help them be prepared at home and at work. That was a huge success, and I look forward to the opportunity to do that again this year. I also had the opportunity to respond to the Dowens Creek 2 fire and work through the process of making emergency evacuation notifications and working with our PIOs, our public information officers, and our dispatchers on alerting our community on needs to evacuate, including the Mount Pisgah fire. All great ways to build relationships, understand the gaps, and work towards mitigating our risk as a community. I've got a lot of projects in the hopper that specifically speak to that, which includes wildfire evacuation planning that I was able to apply for some grant funding that will hopefully augment some of those planning efforts in the future, hopefully this year. And then again, I spoke to this earlier, we've enhanced some of our EOC capability here at the county. For one way that we've done that is by continuing to open our EOC and bring staff in to respond to events such as COVID-19. The wildfire was a small one for Mount Pisgah, and then Snowmageddon February of 2019. And then we were able to acquire Aspire grant asset. You'll see there on the slide, the lower right is a generator. It's a 56 kW generator that was assigned to us from the state of Oregon. It's no cost to the county. We just maintain it and insure it. And it's a capability that we have here locally that we can utilize to support backup power needs in the event of an emergency, such as hooking it up to our emergency, our dispatch center for the sheriff's office or any of our communications towers. And we're outfitting it to plug in at Delta campus if we need the capacity. Next slide. So future challenges and opportunities. I don't foresee any changes in our FTE. I'm happy to report that we are fully staffed as of February of this year. So that's exciting. The staff that I did hire have limited experience in emergency management, specifically at the local government level. The analyst that I hired actually came from one of the hospitals in emergency management, so more of a private sector perspective. So getting them up to speed on local government and the processes for public assistance and EMPG funding and local government funding and what that looks like. The EOC activation here for COVID-19 it's been a great experience for myself as well as for the staff in emergency management and the staff of this organization in exposing them to ICS roles and responsibilities and building interdepartmental relationships. It'll support this capacity effort ongoing. So should we have another storm or experience another natural disaster, we're building capacity countywide in order to respond to these types of events. And when I ask them to come do training and exercise, I think they may be more apt to play with me. So partnering with departments and coordinating efforts for public outreach to inform COVID-19 and best practices on preventing the spread of COVID. Our PIOs are phenomenal, and working with them I think is huge, but they are limited in their capacity. We only have 3 PIOs within Lane County, and I think we could certainly tap other individuals within our organization to take on that role so we can build some depth. So I think that's a challenge I'd like to focus efforts on in the years to come. The other challenge for me in emergency management is I am still a one person. My other staff are just getting up to speed, and the recovery efforts are going to be long term. So the impacts to the program that's just starting to get legs and feet under it, we're going to be challenged by the recovery efforts. Next slide. With that, I am finished, and look, there's 3 minutes left for questions and answers.
We'll take as much time as it takes. So questions from committee members? Any questions from the phone? Well, Patience, I think you answered them all already.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Good to go. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and the work that you're doing on our budget. I really appreciate your attention to detail, Mr. Abel.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward to committee business. Christine, do you have anything from budget staff?
We do not, other than just reminding about the meeting time tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Okay. Meeting time is 2 p.m. tomorrow. Any other items from committee members? Okay, seeing none and hearing none, we're adjourned. We'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.